So hi, my name is Anna, and I'm mentally ill. And that's a pretty bold statement, but I do say it that way because I want to get rid of the stigma. I think we've done a really good job so far, but there's so much more we can do. I would like for mental illness or mental health to be just something normal, like having diabetes or maybe a heart disease. Or I also have a thyroid disease, which I've had to deal with since I was a teenager. And that doesn't seem to be a problem for anyone. But whenever we mention mental health, people kind of look at you like you're crazy. Um, I named the talk the M word, and you see my email address here. So if you have any questions that you want to discuss privately afterwards, please feel free to email me at anna@elastic.co, and I'd be happy to have a chat with you. There was an ad by Lloyd's Bank last summer which talked about the M word as in money. But today we're going to talk about the M word as in mental illness. And I do want to give a trigger warning because I don't want to upset anyone. So if anything, this is my story and it's pretty personal and it's pretty hurtful. If there's anything that I'll be talking about that triggers you, I won't be offended if you're going to drop out now or anytime during the talk, because I don't want to upset you or cause you any negative feelings. So I'll be talking about depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts. If any of that triggers you, please feel free to drop out at any point. Also, a disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm just someone who has been dealing with depression and anxiety for the past 10 or so years. I'm now 30. I would say it started when I was about 19, 20. So this is not a medical professional's story. It's just the story of someone who deals with this. I want to give some numbers because I was curious if there were any studies, and it turns out that actually every 7 years there's a mental health survey done in England, and it was last published in 2016, and these are just some of the numbers that I pulled. So 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience a mental health problem each year. That's a lot of people. 1 in 6 people report experiencing a mental health problem in any given week. 1 in 5 people have had suicidal thoughts. 1 in 15 people have attempted suicide. I also heard that during social distancing, the suicide rate has gone up by as high as 50% in some countries, which is shocking to me. And this is my story. If you just look at these numbers and then kind of like think about it, it's quite shocking. Like 1 in 6, 1 in 5, 1 in 4, 1 in 15. It doesn't sound like much, but it's actually a lot of people that are dealing with mental health related issues. So my story is I suffer from depression and anxiety. And first of all, I looked up a definition. I'm an English major, so I like my definitions. So depression, as defined by the NHS, is the symptoms of depression can be complex and vary widely between people, but as a general rule, if you're depressed, you feel sad, hopeless, and lose interest in things you used to enjoy. The symptoms persist for weeks or months and are bad enough to interfere with your work, social life, and family life. And anxiety is described as a feeling of unease, such as worry or fear, that can be mild or severe. Everyone has feelings of anxiety at some point in their life, but some people find it hard to control their worries. Their feelings of anxiety are more constant and can often affect their daily lives. And again, these are just clinical definitions. Depression and anxiety are very different for everyone. And anxiety, I think sometimes people mistake it for fear. It's so much more than fear. It's so much deeper. For me, it's very crippling. I get into my anxiety is centered around losing people. So I get into these thought loops. If I know that I'm also I like routine. So when I still used to live at home and my mom would come home from work 30 minutes later than she usually would, I would get into this thought loop and I would dramatize things like, did she have a car accident? Did she die? Did something happen at work? So my brain went from being okay to basically worst case scenario. And then you start this thought loop and you get this weird feeling in your stomach and your heart starts racing, and it's not rational, but it didn't stop for me until I could reassure that my mom was fine. This was before I learned, and in the beginning I didn't know what was I experiencing, because I had never had this before. And it even took me a few years to even put the word name anxiety to it and get help for it. Oh no, my presentation froze. Oh, sorry, I just went. You might be familiar with something like this, when people kind of ask you, are you okay? And you say you're fine, because I think it's in our culture to just say that you're fine. It's easier to say that you're fine than to explain what's going on, but in the background you have all these feelings, like you're looking for help, you're sad, you're depressed, you're angry, but maybe you don't know how to put a word to what you're feeling. So I just, a friend of mine sent this to me, so I wanted to include it. It's also good to kind of remember, because sometimes you meet people and they're having a bad day and you're giving them the stamp of being an asshole or something like this. And I think it's good to consider that no one behaves badly for no reason. So always consider what people might be dealing with that you don't know about. So this is my story. My world used to be really dark for a really long time. I was always a child who worried a lot, and started getting really bad after graduating high school, because I wasn't sure what to do with my life. I was always the kid who was successful in school. I always had good grades. And by the way, my screen is supposed to be black right now, in case you're wondering. So I was always good in school, and then after school I was kind of lost because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my parents kind of pushed me to go to university. My parents, I come from a working class background. I'm the first person in my family to graduate college, so it was important to them that I would do it as well. And so I went away for college. It didn't go so well. I studied something that didn't resonate with me. I failed some exams. I had a bad relationship at that time. I was calling my mom all the time, calling my boyfriend. And eventually this anxiety was getting so bad that I had to move back home, and I started therapy. And therapy back then saved my life. I was also self-harming. I was cutting my arms because I had so much pain inside of me, and for some reason it helped me to hurt myself physically, to kind of express the pain I was feeling inside of me that I couldn't get rid of. And it makes no sense. I didn't do it for attention. My family actually doesn't know about this. And I have tattoos now to kind of cover up the scars, and partially also because I did like the pain, like a little messed up that way. But yeah, so I did cut my arm, so it was pretty bad. I had suicidal thoughts. I knew exactly where I would crash my car on the highway. And I somehow made it through that phase, but I was never fine. I made it through college, but I didn't live. I kind of existed. I managed to work more or less. I managed to have some social connections, but then I would also have like periods at a time where I would sleep all day. I didn't want to be up. I didn't want to face reality. I didn't want to leave the house for weeks. My family thought that I was weird or that I was lazy, but they never really thought that anything was wrong with me, really. And my mom's a nurse, and I'm saying that not to blame her, because my mom really is a wonderful person. But I think it's just hard that, like, and I think it shows that even people in the medical field sometimes don't know how to deal with mental illness. My mom is wonderful with physical illnesses. If I hurt myself physically, she exactly knows what to do. But I think it was just hard for her to see that her kid was suffering from something that she didn't know how to cure. In 2017, I started my current job at a company called Elastic. And it was hard for me to get up in the morning. I would still sleep in late and I would work late. And thankfully, the company allowed me to have a flexible work schedule so I could make my mental illness work while still working. But it started getting worse again in the beginning of 2018. I was dealing with another breakup and I hit rock bottom, and small things like taking a shower was hard, making myself something to eat was hard. It almost seemed impossible. I wanted to sleep all day, but I couldn't sleep. I would cry randomly. I had thought loops and it got really bad. And at one point I was traveling and I broke down and I opened up to a friend, and she kind of lovingly encouraged me to get help, which I thought, I knew that I needed help, but you always try to kind of explain to yourself, or maybe it's not bad enough, I don't deserve help, or maybe it will get better, I can heal myself by myself, but I couldn't. So I went to see a psychiatrist. I was still living in Germany back then, and in Germany there is a rule that a doctor needs to see you within 30 days. You have the right to be seen for a mental health condition, which I think is pretty brilliant. I know that not every country is set up that way. And the psychiatrist back then recommended that I take medication. So I started, this is actually a picture of all the medication that I take on a daily basis. It's not all prescription medication. Some of it is just vitamins. There's someone who's not muted. Can you, oh, thank you. Sorry, there was just some backlash. So I started taking a medicine called sertraline, which is a really common antidepressant. I was really lucky because the first medication that I tried worked for me. And then I know a lot of other people are struggling with just finding the right medication for a long time. I have friends who've been struggling for years and nothing seems to work for them. And for me, I feel really lucky because I had to just experiment with the dosage a little bit. And I'm a huge proponent of medication. I have a thyroid issue, as I said in the beginning, and I've been taking medication for thyroid illness since I was 14 years old, and it enables me to keep my symptoms under control and live a better life. And I was really scared for a long time to take antidepressants because I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be a junkie. I didn't want to be addicted. But the truth is, it's just a medication, just like any medication you would take. It's just like my thyroid pills or like insulin that you would take or heart pills that you would take. And the truth is that there's a chemical imbalance in my brain that needs to be regulated by these pills. I also suffer from I'm very sensitive to noises and light, for example. Like I used to be super sensitive. I couldn't be awake during the day. It would drive me crazy to hear someone eat. And so the psychiatrist said that those were all symptoms that there is something going on in my brain, which is in fact chemical. And that's what these pills help me with. And after a few weeks of taking the medication, it was literally like this dark veil had been lifted from my face. And I could see that the world can actually be pretty great. So you do have to give it some time. For most people, it takes 4 to 6 weeks to kind of kick in. And some people face some side effects in the beginning, but they weren't really bad. They were surely manageable compared to like if I was weighing like side effects to what I'm getting, and now I'm totally fine. And don't get me wrong, medication alone wasn't enough. I made a lot of lifestyle changes. I worked really hard on myself. I got rid of toxic people in my life, which is really hard if you've done it before. I worked on developing better habits. I moved to London. And eventually I started therapy again in January of 2019, thanks to private health insurance of my employer, because the NHS here thought that it was bad enough for me to go to therapy. And I don't blame them, because I know there's other people who are not lucky like me that have private health insurance. And I did therapy for almost a year. I did a therapy form called schema therapy, which basically looks at toxic patterns or schemas which you have developed throughout your life, and emotional deficiencies that you have experienced, and then you kind of try to decode them, see where they come from, and you try to manage certain situations better. Most days I'm fine now, but I have some really bad days. They don't happen that often anymore. Like I had a period in my life where it was literally, where I would literally not leave my room except for night for 3 months. Now I might have a bad day. I might have a bad week, 2 bad weeks. As I said, the last 2 weeks were kind of hard for different reasons, but I always know that it'll get better. And the truth is that my mental illness will always be a struggle. You can learn to live with it, but there's no cure. It's not like curing a cold. Especially during isolation, it's really hard. It's sort of my personal nightmare. I have breakdowns like every couple of days because I love routine, and this whole I love going to my office, and this whole isolation thing has basically put my life upside down. I'm sure that a lot of you are feeling the same way, and I've been coping okay, I think. But yeah, it still is my personal nightmare. I cry every day. I feel very anxious. Some days I struggle getting out of bed at the moment. And for a long time, I had such a hard time accepting that I will never be able to defeat this illness. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I don't like having this illness. I was seeing it as a flaw. And what you see here is a quote that helped me a lot. There's a statue on the South Bank, a Nelson Mandela statue, and the quote is written on it. And he said, "The struggle is my life." And obviously, his struggle was the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. My struggle is different. I'm not saying it's as important as apartheid, but the truth is we all struggle with something, and it's okay to struggle. And I do recommend that you kind of try to live with that struggle and don't try to constantly fight it. Like at one point I had to accept that depression and anxiety, I can't just fight that part of me. It's like fighting a friend that will be with you for your whole life. Maybe you don't want to have it as a friend, but in the end you're always better off just making friends with the situation and trying to constantly fight it. If I want you, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this presentation, is that there is hope. No matter how much you're struggling, no matter how dark your world may be at the moment, or no matter how dark the world of a loved one may be at the moment, there's hope and there's help. And I put together some resources which are very UK specific that you can use. I will share the presentation after the call. So there's a few professional numbers you can call: NHS mental health services, you can call your GP. If you don't want to call a professional, talk to someone, anyone you can trust. And keep in mind that getting help is not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of strength. When you are in need, please do me a favor and reach out to someone, anyone. Reach out to me. Sometimes it's easier to reach out to someone who's sort of a stranger, but do talk to someone. You're not alone. I've been there. I've been there in so many situations where you feel like you're alone and no one's there for you. And then you kind of get into this like thought loop that the world is bad and no one cares about you, and that's not how it is at all. And sometimes you just need someone you can talk to, someone you can vent to, someone who can be a sounding board, and maybe just someone who will tell you it's okay. For a long time I thought I didn't deserve help. I thought I wasn't suffering enough, it wasn't bad enough, it would go away, I would be able to help myself, and you keep telling yourself all these lies. But the truth is I was suffering in silence for too long. I could have gotten help so much sooner. I found this, and when I was still living in Clapham, it says vulnerability unites us. That's how we make real connections, by sharing our stories with people, by sharing our flaws, our weaknesses, by being vulnerable, not by being perfect. People don't empathize with perfection, they empathize with vulnerability. And also, this is something that a friend of mine said, and I have it written in my notebook, and I look at it every day. It says, "Remember that you don't have to suffer. I promise you that someone in this virtual meetup is struggling with the exact same thing you are struggling with right now. You are not alone." Also, something that I noticed is that we've gotten really good at talking about mental health. But what I noticed is that when I reach out to some of my friends, they sometimes get overwhelmed when I'm in a bad situation because they don't know how to help me. Or with one of my friends, even escalated so far that she really did upset me when I reached out to her for help. And again, I don't blame her. She just didn't know what to do. But it wasn't nice to have to deal with that in a situation when you're already not feeling great. So I put down some suggestions on how you can talk to someone who may be in a bad situation. So first of all, ask them if they want you to just listen or if they want advice. I'm someone, like, what really takes me off is getting unsolicited advice from people. Ask them what they need. Do they need just comfort? Do they need distraction? Do they want to talk it through? And never give unsolicited advice. So I don't like when people tell me, oh, you should really see a therapist for this. Yes, I know this, and I am seeing a therapist, but this is not why I'm talking to you at the moment. Also, try to not use any judgmental language and make them feel heard and understood. So you can say things like, I understand what you're going through must be so hard, and tell them that you are here for them all the way. I found this on Instagram, so some things you can say instead of don't worry, you'll be fine. I won't read them out loud, but again, I will share the slides in the recording, and I think some of those suggestions are really good. It's good to keep on hand on your phone in case you do need some alternatives. Some of my other favorite resources that I like when I have a bad day, there's an organization in Chicago, it's called Hope for the Day. They have fantastic resources. They have podcasts. They have an interview series. So check them out. And then my friend, Rick Ossowski, he does a podcast called Anthologies of Hope, where he kind of interviews people who struggle with mental health and share their stories. There is selfcare.tech Twitter account. There's the Breaking Taboo Instagram account. I also have what I call a positivity Trello board, where I basically collect screenshots and nice things that people have said to me over the years. So when I have a really bad day, I look at it to remind myself that I am worthy and that there are people who care about me. And I don't know if you have heard of the open source happiness packets, but it's basically a little service where you can send someone a nice email, but it's called a happiness packet. It's totally free, so check out the link to that. Now, I want you to write down the next couple of sentences somewhere, anywhere. Make a note on your phone, put a sticky note on your laptop, write it on your mirror, put it somewhere where you can see it every day, and do me a favor and repeat it to yourself every single day until you believe it, because it's the truth. I am appreciated, I am enough, I matter, and I am not alone. I had these words written on my mirror for so long, and I promise you, sometimes you have to say things to you even if you don't believe them yet. So fake it till you make it. But you are all these things. You are appreciated enough, and you matter, and you are not alone. So please make a note somewhere and put it somewhere where you can see it every day. Also, I saw this on the internet, and that this really resonated with me. You have survived every single thing you thought you wouldn't. Like when in the middle of March, my office in London announced that they would close for the foreseeable future, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to survive this? I don't know how I'll get through this. Like, it was my personal nightmare. But now we're in June, and yes, I've cried a lot. I've been very anxious, depressed. It's been tough, but I'm still alive. And that's also, I'm still alive, and I will come out of this stronger. And that's also something that my therapist always used to say to me, like, look at all the things you have survived in the past and know that reassure yourself that it will give you the confidence to make it through everything that's awaiting you in the present and in the future. That's all I have for you today. today. I'm happy to take questions now. I'm also happy to take questions via email. You can message me on meetup.com. If you would like to jump on a Zoom call privately sometime, I'm also happy to do that. Just reach out to me. I will stop recording in a second, so your discussion will not be on video. So whatever is discussed in this call will stay in this call. I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. As I said, no one is an asshole for no reason. So if someone's having a bad day and mistreating you, maybe give them the kindness they deserve, and try to see behind the facade. So thank you. Also take time off if you need it. My employer is very generous and we get something called COVID-19 leave. But even if you have to take PTO, please take it, take time off. I used to feel bad because I'm a single person. I don't have a family, I don't have kids, but I was kind of neglecting my own mental health, and I started taking every Monday off and every Friday afternoon, and it's been so nice to just have a bit more time to breathe. Because even if you have nowhere to go, I think that isolation burnout is a real thing, and don't take your mental